listened to, I had it today. This week we listened to. I just bringed up my own Twitch. Hold on. I apologize to anyone watching the pod. The Strange Case of ... by Halestorm. It was selected by Brian. Why don't you go into your process behind selecting this album?
So I picked this one. It's a little, in some ways, it's a little bit different. It's still obviously in the metal genre, but it's, my last two picks were both very progressive with Jethro Tull and Rush. So changed up a little bit and picked one of the only few artists that has a female vocalist that I actually like. I am not generally a fan of female vocalists. There were a lot of good ones that I enjoyed that came out of the 80s back in, hair metal era, and when you had those sort of first emerging 80s rockers, Hart, Joan Jett. And since then, not really a fan of female vocalists. But I do enjoy the vocals of Lzzy Hale. And I think a lot of that is, a lot of female vocalists sound very similar to me. In this case, very different. You're also putting it on top of a metal backdrop. This particular album did have the Grammy Award winner for Heavy Metal Song of the Year when it came out. It also has some pretty solid drumming. RJ Hale won for Best Drummer on the album, a few different awards. So it seemed like a good pick, something a little bit different, but still had some recognized musicianship.
Yeah? All right. And, okay, so their last name is Hale. That makes a lot of sense. Because I was wondering, why is it Halestorm, Hale? Because when I first searched it on Spotify, I was like, oh, it's Halestorm, Hal Storm. And then I found it, and it was some dude who had like 1,000 plays, and I was like, or like 1,000 followers, and I was like, I don't think this is right. Yeah, I was like, I mean, if it is, I mean, cool, good for Brian, but I don't think that's, it doesn't look like the same thing. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, you have two band members that have the last name Hale, Lzzy and RJ.
And evidently in their original incarnation 3, their dad was on
their
bass
dad
for
was
a
in
while.
Yes, their dad could play bass and accordion.
Sick. That's sick, actually. And that's accordion is a great instrument to like have your dad come in and feature on the accordion.
Now, probably good that he was dropped from the band. This was their second album. Their first album has more sexual innuendo than this one has. This one has a little bit more, rocky, fun stuff. There's a little bit of sexual innuendo, most certainly in it. The first album had a lot more. Probably not appropriate when your dad's in the band.
I mean, yeah, my first thought was definitely like, were I a father, how would I feel like be playing bass along to this, right? Which is not to say that there's anything wrong with discussion of that subject matter. It's just an interesting. It would be a very interesting position to be in as a musician, where it's like, this is my daughter explicating the details of her sex life, and I'm just sitting here playing the bass or the accordion.
Sex positive, it's not. It's not American. But, I mean,
no, I'm totally pro sex positivity.
I mean, you do have a brother and sister in the band together.
Yeah. Although a brother and sister talking about their sex lives is different than a parental figure. I don't know. I think the dynamic is quite different. I don't know. Because, it's not like they go into graphic details or anything. This isn't like pornographic music. We're not, describing the acts. It's just... But it is, sexually charged, certainly.
And in I Miss the Misery, RJ is the background vocalist that sings at certain parts over as basically the male component from the relationship. But
so their brother and sister, they're not married. That's basically
correct.
Yeah, because who knows, right? Could be. I'm sorry, I don't want to put that out there.
They're not from that part of the South, Ethan.
I don't want to put that out there.
They're from Pennsylvania, right?
Hey, we love Pennsylvania. We love Pennsylvania.
We do now.
Yes, we do. Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Courtesy of the Navajo Nation, we managed to stay blue as well. But...
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. No, I definitely.
Every word of advice: don't sell us your water. We're going to be asking in a couple of years. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Wait, sell us your water.
We're basically the only places we're going to have as viable places to obtain water for expansion of the city are going to be basically getting it from the residents.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, friendly word of advice, please don't sell us your water.
Don't let the city expand. Yeah, exactly.
Inhibit it.
Inhibit it. We're good. We're good here in Phoenix.
We'll pay a lot. Not worth it.
To be honest, we don't need more people. Like
we're good.
We're good. We're good. We have too many, I think, already.
12th largest city in the union, or 11th?
Fifth. Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the United States. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly higher than 12. It's definitely. Because I thought it was New York, LA, Detroit, Chicago, and then Phoenix. That's
something like that. There might be one other California city in there too before Phoenix.
Yeah, or like Philly, Boston.
Biggest cities in the U.S. This has nothing to do with Halestorm, but I need to know. Okay. By area, not by area. New York City,
we aren't back.
Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, then Phoenix.
By area,
then,
yeah, but
no. By population. By population.
Okay.
By population.
Yeah, because by area, New York is.
Yeah. No, by area, By area, Jacksonville is the largest city in the United States. Because it's 875 square miles. But by population no way.
Population per square mile, no one touches New York.
Right.
Like it is. Yeah. It's in its own little world.
Right. And then Philadelphia, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, San Jose. Yeah. Okay. Let's get back to Halestorm.
So one of the other reasons that I went with this album too is because I've ragged on some of the more personalized lyrics that we've had.
Yeah.
And this album actually has a great deal of personalized lyric. It kind of combines sort of the generic, let's have fun, traditional, 70s style rock.
Right.
With there's the sequence in the middle where you have the 3 back-to-back songs that are just very emotional and personal lyrics.
Right.
And then you also have the sexual innuendo songs. So there's a lot of mix in the album.
Yeah. There is that is something that was one of my notes, is that I feel like there's 3 levels here. There's metal, and then there's a couple songs that are just hard rock. They're still rock, they're still but they're not as in your face. And then there's just the soft ballad songs, which are literally just radio pop or something, right? You know what I'm saying?
Which ironically are songs that don't see radio play. The singles off the album were Love Bites, I Miss the Misery, and those were the first 2 singles that really got a lot of play. None of the soft ones did.
Right. I have definitely heard Love Bites before on the radio.
And that's the Grammy winner.
Right. Yeah. But I I suppose that from the order perspective, that is the only song that I've ever heard from this band, and I didn't even know it was this band until I listened to it just now. Or not just now, but this week. Previously, I was not familiar at all. But it makes sense that that's the Grammy winner. It seems like it's the most produced song. But like I would say, like in terms of production, they have some pretty like high level of production. Like you could tell.
This was signed to Atlantic, so
yes,
yeah. You can tell there's money that's been put in. They got good engineers. There's good mixing. The mastering is like solid. Everything sounds together. It sounds like, you know what I'm saying? It's really like using cohesive, not as the way that we normally use it, but all the sounds sort of, are glued together, right? It's definitely sounds major label.
Yeah, they're definitely not an indie band.
Yeah.
No, but if an indie band could pull off that, the level of just production alone, if an indie band could pull that off, I'd be amazed. You could tell there's some expensive gear that they used. Okay. Yeah. What are your guys' notes? What's the big things that stood out to you?
To me, easily the strangest thing is precisely hearing that kind of like, it's weird hearing her channel these like metal, like kind of cartoonishly edgy, machismo laden like metal icons, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of her vocal delivery, in terms of all of the backing instrumentation, right? On at least the more metal inflected songs, right? The stuff that doesn't go into ballad territory. And then sing about like her pretty uniquely feminine coded perspective on relationships. Mm-hmm. It's weird. It's really jarring in places. It's like as has been a recurring theme on this show, I always ask myself, like, what is being communicated by the choice to deliver those words in that vocabulary?
Right.
In this case, I don't know. It feels like they just thought it sounded cool, and that's fine. Again, we've discussed before that that's totally acceptable. And admittedly, she verges into some like she is clearly unpacking some pretty overtly toxic relationship dynamics in a lot of places, but also not really examining them critically. Mm-hmm. She's just sort of singing about them like, oh man, this is just what my sick, twisted life is like. And there's not really much of a, seriously, that's,
yeah.
There's really no condemnation of it. There's really no addressing it as this sort of unhealthy space to exist in. So it's weird to me because I'm used to metal when it chooses not to be self-aware about like the ways in which its perspective is, the perspective being expressed is like harmful to oneself.
Right.
It's very clearly made a choice, and they usually deliver it through concept albums, right? Where it's like, this is a character study of somebody who is not self-aware about the way their choices hurt them, right?
Right.
It's really, really, really weird.
What and even
this kind of generally introspective, if admittedly cartoonish genre, like, and I say this is the lover of metal, right? But we get cartoonish. Deliver this like complete acceptance of toxic relationship dynamics with no real critical reflection.
I mean, I
It's
Miss
weird.
the Misery almost says, no, I want this back. I want the toxic relationship. It's not a it's not that sort of growth that sometimes you see. Like you're saying, it's just a reflection upon without actually saying this is bad.
And there's not either an impacting, because again, like my favorite artist is Nine Inch Nails, and the dude's singing about his damage basically until the mid 2000s. I mean, basically until year zero, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was 2008. But like, he was always unpacking it and examining why he couldn't and wouldn't let himself heal, right? There was a lot of thought and introspection about it, whereas here there's this like, and I'm not gonna say that in order to criticize Lizzie Hale as an artist, because honestly, I think it's kind of the record label's fault. There are a number of tracks on here that read as this, like, that are constructed and produced in such a way that it's like, this is super catchy. This is like, certified early 2010s era banger. In a way that is almost, you can almost hear the record exec saying like, oh yeah, we should get, there aren't really women in the metal space right now. Let's get that demographic.
Oh, 100%.
Let's get female metal fans. Let's give them an icon and rake in the money, right? I think the song where I felt that the most was definitely Daughters of Darkness.
Oh,
creating this anthem and like shared identity for girl metal listeners, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, I really want, I am genuinely happy to see women in this space, but on the other hand, I can't help but feel some of the industry cynicism guiding at least some of these singles. There are a lot of cool, awesome, genuine moments on this album, but I also know this album was released and they were signed in particular during the era when the industry was getting its fingers into and like rendering homogenous basically everything they touched, right? And I realized I'd be interested in hearing what these guys would do outside of whatever contract they are in. Because there's stuff that just feels like it's that same, I guess it's the pops, and I'm sorry I've been ranting like without interruption for like 5 minutes, but this album gave me a lot of thought. But I think that same like level of completely uncritical, like, yeah, man, this is what my sick, twisted life is like, right? That like commodification of like an identity and a state of being without really making you think too hard about it is a like total pop move.
Yeah, you can definitely tell
and that
where
pop sensibility,
where they're looking, where it's record label influenced, very clearly. And then you can tell the parts of it that have less of that sort of record label producer influence.
Yeah, they strike a balance. I would say this album definitely leans heavy into the simplistic hooks, things that can like really just catch you and then just stay memorable in your head, like type of like radio core music that record labels just absolutely love, right? And me not having listened to anything they've released before this or after, right? Anything else, I couldn't tell you if that's just what their music sounded like or not. I mean, because like, to what degree is it they already knew how to make this kind of music and the record label is just like, hell yeah? And to what degree is it like the record label going, hey, we want you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, either way though, that is this sort of I think I'm still willing to chalk it up to record labelitis in some cases, and that even if that was what they were making independently, that selection filter is still in place, right? Like the fact that that the record label didn't have to do much more work in order to sanitize and like make sure that it's like, no, we're not going to encourage introspection. Introspection hurts.
Yeah.
If they weren't, if you know, the record label didn't have to strip that out, that's still just kind of the like what the late aughts, early 10s era music was like, and them knowing how to produce it still feels like it's more of a cynical cash thing in cases.
Yeah.
Or if it's not, like, girl, see a therapist.
I mean, it is performative. Like,
stop dating shitty men. Huh?
Like,
what was that?
All art contains a kernel of truth. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be written from a present perspective. Like,
what?
You can write a song about how you love to date shitty men, but not actually be currently dating any shitty men.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you get a lot of sense in, especially when you look at the first album. The third album came out was much more sort of pop metal, whereas this was like a blend. But when you look at the first and second album, this being the second, there's a lot of, you get a sense of someone who has a lot of body image and self-esteem issues that she doesn't necessarily have today, but like you were saying, Ethan, that she is reflecting upon.
And I think that's a really common thing in metal, is especially metal that's like this, that's meant to make you feel powerful. I think a lot of disempowered people tend to be attracted to that, and that empowerment can, help them. I mean, it can also go, like, it can be negative too, but... What, you disagree?
In a lot of cases, I think in a lot of cases it cultivates an identity around not examining and healing.
Yeah.
Because again, precisely, there's like, when the best music that I've heard written from like after somebody's period of suffering is over, like, examines, unpacks, and tracks the healing process. Or if it doesn't, if it leaves in an unresolved place, it does a really good job of identifying all of the identifying rather than glorifying the problems.
Right.
Whereas here again, it's like building an identity around this like difference and like edginess, but it's like and I say this to somebody who's like, let your freak fly, man. Like, I am here for all sorts of unconventional lifestyles, but a lot of this stuff is like just tolerating emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Which building an identity around that doesn't seem great to me.
About being the most tolerant to emotional abuse. Yeah, no, I mean, well, therapist take.
For the record, I realized that what I should say is, like, mad respect to them all for their chops. Like, the album sounds great, and they perform all of their stuff really well. I'm sure they're awesome live. I'm just like, yeah, it got me, like, it elicited a lot of complicated feelings about the state of the industry and the genre as a whole.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you bring up the state of the industry, because I did see them live on this album tour after they had won the Grammy, and it was a major tour. When it was booked, it was at the Marquee, and they weren't even billed as the headliner, which everything was set up prior to them actually winning the Grammy.
Oh, but, okay, fair enough.
For the state of the industry is, they're touring they're playing every day. And at that point in time, that band was making less than like $30,000 for that tour because it was all going back to the record label to recoup for everything they had done to put the album out. So it's like
Jesus Christ.
That's what they do. That's what record labels do. Is fucking they give you a lot of money, but it's just a loan and you have to pay it back.
Yep, by working like a slave, basically.
By working like a
it's
slave.
It's an indentured servitude for musicians.
Yeah.
It really is.
And they'll keep you alive, but you know, you're working, you're doing the tours that they want. You're fucking yeah. I mean, is that worth a Grammy? One has to decide that for themselves, I
And now,
suppose.
I mean, and they've released other albums since then and toured. So I mean, obviously, it was a stepping stone for
Right.
a good career.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
and a Grammy doesn't hurt. I mean, I think we'd all like to have a Grammy on our mantles, right?
Right. Yeah. I think the most tragic is the artists that don't go to win Grammys, that still have $100,000 that they have to pay back to the record label. Yeah.
Or people who wind up in the positions Kesha wound up in, right, where it's fucking, oh yeah, we own your entire brand. Like, you can't even release music outside of your arrangement with us.
Right.
Almost all of them are in that situation. That's pretty common.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, and that's completely fucked.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, biggest, most memorable like pop culture example is Prince, where him changing his whole brand to be a symbol because that's like to separate himself from the record label, like
to avoid copyright laws.
Right, exactly. And it's funny because most people just know that as, oh my gosh, Prince is so weird. He tried to go by a symbol. He tried to make his name into just a one little symbol. But it was actually very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a very smart man. I mean, obviously he had some issues. But when it came to his art, he did know what he was doing after he had that. Yeah, John Fogerty had similar issues when he left Creedence Clearwater Revival because he and the band didn't get along. There were family members. People were using his music. There were all kinds of lawsuits between them. But record labels are, there's good things that can happen. It can launch your career, but you're probably going to have to wait 5 to 10 years before you can have your career of your own.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of depends on like how well the marketing does, and because if you're signing with a record label, you're leaving it to them to market you correctly to the right audience, and if they fuck that up, that falls on you. Yes, that's your problem, not theirs, and that sucks. So like, you could get lucky. You could be a Billie Eilish and fucking just take off. And like, there's like, she's made her money back. Fucking, I don't even know if she had a loan. She's kind of more of an insider, but like, you know what I'm saying is like, if that happens, but like, you hear about all these like, a lot modernly, it's like these like, the record labels are trying to engineer these like SoundCloud core rappers with like, colorful hair and face tattoos and shit. And that is quite a commitment, brand wise and just personally, to get face tattoos for your fucking music just to fit in with the brand. And then, people recognize you as just an industry plant. See, I hate that term because an industry plant is literally every fucking musician ever that's ever signed with a label that wasn't popular before they signed with a label.
Yeah.
Like, that's all of that. Like, some are popular before and then, it's fine, but, like, people will, like, try to hunt out industry plants. And, like, oh, is this person an industry plant? Is this person an industry plant? They're all industry plants. Like, unless they're completely independent, they're all industry plants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Lyrics. Is there anything specific that stood out to you? Aside from what we've already discussed. We've already obviously discussed a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing about the lyrics in the album is some of it is sort of that juvenile, let's party, let's rock and roll, and then others is the reflective, but let's call it not introspective,
right,
behavior about some of Lizzie's life. And I think Sam covered that in pretty solid detail as to why there may not have been that level of introspection.
right.
Could be a record label thing, could be it's just when it's an album this controlled by the record label. I think that it still does, and obviously we're three guys. It's unfortunate we don't have a female with us for today, because the lyrics are written from a female perspective as to how much of this is something where she didn't want to have that added level. She just wanted it to be, this was my experience, and not have the introspective. It's hard to say. I can't.
Right.
It's much harder to comment on her perspective when writing.
Yeah, it's true. I will say that I think to a degree this is a feminist album, right? It's like female empowering, but only on not on like the deep levels, not like on a deep like level of like it's just the overall self-empowerment. I think the biggest example is you call me a bitch like it's a bad thing, right? It's like that's a feminist sort of idea, right? Is evolving beyond like male criticisms,
right?
Which I think is good, but also sort of it is just a surface level, whatever. But also this came out in 2012, so the climate was a little different. Like I think that in terms of like gender politics, we've significantly changed in the last 8 years.
And I think what I would identify as like the industry wisdom governing things here. Again, I in no way am ever going to dispute that people like this genuinely exist. But in terms of who we see get propped up, who we see resources funneled into, whether it's naturally occurring or engineered, I don't really care, right? There's still industry influence in that. Like, this is what they're selecting and putting out. I agree that there are some sentiments that genuinely do resonate with like a kind of female empowerment, but in other cases, I feel like it's sort of like the tragedy that befalls female action stars, which I forget the name of the article. I'd love to share it otherwise, but it's basically taking an act and saying, "Give me a man, but a man that I want to see in their underwear." Like, give me a man I want to fuck, essentially, as the character, right? And some of the lyrical content in You Call Me a Bitch Like It's a Bad Thing is basically just saying like, hey, I'm a woman treating men like men tend to, like, we've all culturally decided men treat women.
Right.
Cool. I can retaliate. Like, again, I do think it is more sincerely empowering in certain ways than that, but
it's not necessarily constructive. It's empowering. Yeah. It's not necessarily constructive, right?
Right.
It's
very
like
different things.
Yeah, like retaliating. The idea of like retaliating is never constructive, right? That's never, But like it is empowering, and I think that is sort of the goal of the music, is to make you feel excited and powerful and energetic, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it goes any deeper than that. I don't think...
It's empowering you to seize a different flavor of misery for yourself. But...
I mean, I do think there are songs specifically where she's trying to get into the perspective of the, of the boyfriend, where she's talking about letting her in, that goes into... That one's a very different perspective than the rest of the songs on the album, though.
Right.
Also, I one of my notes, Break In.
Yeah.
If you decide in your head that you're listening to Christian alternative, it still works. Some of the choices she made in like the bridge and chorus sections are like total like Christian alt harmonic palette.
Listen,
and I was like, what the
Christian
fuck?
alternative has appropriated those harmonic palettes. Okay,
that's true.
Because Christian
appropriated them long enough ago, though, that I think.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Let me just say something, and I want to say this live, and I want to say this for the whole world to hear. Okay, modern Christian music. I'm not talking about historical Christian music. Modern Christian music is not original in literally any way. All they do is copy things that already exist and then put Jesus on it.
Yeah.
It is literally just a capitalism-ized Jesus version of fucking... It's like a knockoff fucking... Here's the best example. When we still used GameCubes and like N64s and shit, and you could buy those like knockoff controllers that had like turbo buttons? That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. And that turbo button is Jesus.
This is my favorite description of Christian alternative music ever, Ethan. That was
right.
That was fantastic.
And I'm not saying there aren't Christian artists that are innovative, because there absolutely are. There are people who are Christians who are innovative, but Christian music is not, ever, and it can't be by definition, because that's all it is it's just the Christian version of something. It's just capitalism, guys. You're just being sold shit. You're just being sold shit. Okay.
All the time.
Halestorm. Speaking of being sold shit, Halestorm.
I was like, did they try and sell us something in the album?
No, they didn't. They didn't.
Okay.
No,
they're selling an identity, but
yeah.
I won't go any further into.
I want to get in some positives. I think some of the hooks that they have in here and some of the simplistic riffs that they use are really good. Like, it's like simplistic sounds negative, but I should say this. They are optimally using their space and their time, and like, they're like, hey, this is a riff that's only 3 notes, but it sounds fucking sick. Let's repeat it 12 times.
Yeah. And
it sounds amazing. Like, and they do a really good job with that little bit. And I think that's really the biggest charm of the music for me, is that it's not difficult listening. It's not something that you have to sit and ponder and figure out and puzzle. It is just fun. That's it.
Yeah, and I should clarify, like, I genuinely liked this album. Like,
yeah.
Part of the reason I'm unpacking so much of what's behind it is because I think seeing that I like being able to say that I like something and that it is also, I can perceive some flaws and concerning influences in it, is just a measure of the fact that I think it is pretty worthwhile. Because I agree, it's like sonically super, super satisfying.
Yeah.
In fact, the fact that it was like so consistently like, yeah, that's what I should be hearing right now. Like, they're evolving this perfectly was what started me like tipped me off to the fact that I'm like,
Oh, I agree. I think because this is not. I generally do not like most modern albums because they do, at least that are record label produced, because they have a very distinct feel, like we've talked about. But the combination of the musicianship I think makes a big difference on the album. While there are, if you listen really closely, sometimes you can hear the intricacies of like the guitar solo, or if you're listening for it, you can hear the intricacy of the drum fill. But they're very sporadic. It's not like listening to the Rush album where every 30 seconds there's something deep being performed. It's done sporadically to where you have that consistency that you can listen for. But then if you listen for that deeper musicianship, that sound in the fills, the bass you really never pick up. I think they're pretty typical bass lines, but at least with the guitar and the drums, some of the things Lizzie does vocally, there are those accents in there on top of picking those really cool riffs that can be repeated that just like I re-listened to this album while I was exercising. It's a good, outside of when you get to that sort of more ballady portion that slows down, it's very, pump you up kind of album.
Yeah, I definitely liked the slow sections less. I think it's just a stylistic preference. That kind of music just tends to bore me. The like slower, super vocal centric, they kind of tone out, the rest, everything else in the background is sort of, it's still there, but it's, it's brought down, and it's just like an emotion, it's like the singer
Right.
being emotional.
I do think, though, Ethan, they do a good job of bringing it back in a way that reflects that emotion.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
they do a good job of when to actually bring in the instruments again to sort of enhance the emotional aspect of the song.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, instruments, we talked about that. Favorite tracks? Any standout tracks? Anything that anyone likes? Any track that you fucking hate?
I had a marked favorite, and I completely. Okay, there's my notes. Yeah. I mean, Miss the Misery was really good. It was again, I can talk a lot about
the relationship aspect.
Yeah, hoping that people will evolve for their own sake, will evolve past the perspective expressed here. But yeah, it's still super cool, tasty, well constructed.
That's
plenty of good riffs.
That's my favorite, just musically song. Yeah, I agree, Sam. The sort of S&M / domestic violence combination that's reflected in that song, probably not healthy.
Yeah.
But I think that's also part of why she's choosing a act like Kicking in the Face as opposed to something that more realistically she enjoyed. I mean, maybe she did, I don't know. But we won't judge on that. But I think part of it, when you watch the music video, when she says Kicking in the Face, she does like a really high leg kick. I mean, it's definitely, you get the feeling she's picked that act because it's something that probably didn't happen to exaggerate the meaning of the song, or it could have been because the producer said, hey, this sounds cool. There could be any number of reasons why. But just it isn't as musically, it doesn't have the musical complexities that Love Bites contains at parts, especially the guitar solo in Love Bites is far more complicated. But I just love the feel of I Miss the Misery. While it's simple on the drums, he changes up what he does with each verse a little bit and kind of spices it up. But it's just a good sort of rockin' song. Ethan?
What do you think of Ethan?
I'm hungry. I need sustenance to keep my brain going. Yes. Yeah. Love Bites definitely feels like the single, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. To be honest, I didn't save any of these songs. I don't really think I'm gonna be coming back to this album too often. But I didn't dislike any of them either. Like, I could easily listen to the entire album in one sitting. Yeah, so no favorites for me, is what I'm saying. None.
And I Miss the Misery is the song that I heard that particular single, and I was like, well, let me listen to this and see what else they have on the album. That's the one that caught my attention the most.
There you go.
When they, in their deluxe album, they actually have some guest vocalists from Disturbed, from Alter Bridge that come on and sing with them for their final song of the album, which is a good sort of concluding song, and one where they had like 3 or 4 different guest metal vocalists. In the original album track, they don't.
Right. That's why it's deluxe.
Exactly. You gotta get something for your money.
You gotta get
a couple
something.
extra songs that didn't make the original album. Let's just briefly touch on that, since we've talked about the industry. Deluxe albums. Oftentimes, what do they contain? Sometimes something nice, like a live track if they've toured, but oftentimes it's like 2 or 3 songs that were not good enough to make the cut originally.
Yeah.
That's usually what you're getting, which is good for fans. You get to hear the other stuff, but it's not necessarily, you're not going to get the A-list material, right? Or it would have made the album.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're always going to put their best stuff, like, out for everyone to hear. I think that, deluxe edition of albums function the way that they need to, It's just something extra for the fans. You don't necessarily need to spend an extra $1 or $2 if you don't want to.
And I buy them.
Or it's the sort of thing where it's not even so much that, like, I can even see it being this sort of thing where it's not even so much that the extra tracks are like bad or weren't as good as the other ones, but it's just the sort of thing where they're like, well, if we're sending this to critics and reviewers, if we overstay our welcome, they're gonna knock us points just because we held their attention for 5 or 10 minutes longer than they wanted to have their attention held.
That's true.
Or,
and sometimes you write songs that just don't fit in the album, but, like, are still good songs. And I think that goes with what Sam was saying. It's like, sometimes you're like, yeah, I mean, I want this song. I wrote these songs at the same time. It's just, this is just not the same. It just doesn't fit in the album. And, so you're just like, here's a couple bonus tracks.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then you have some people who, and there are varying approaches to that, because I think there are people who are just musically generative enough that it's like they can finish a track that doesn't work with the album, whereas you'll have some artists who are like, oh, I have this riff that I've been holding onto for like 20 years and never found use for, but now I am ready to finish and release this song.
Yeah, definitely has to do with approach.
Yeah. That's it.
Because there's definitely a lot of artists where I can see where they go, oh, this doesn't fit on the album. Why would I touch that track? Yeah, it's just fucking leave it in my fucking library of files that I have of half-saved songs and my fucking...
I think whether you're an indie artist versus whether you're a label artist can affect that too. Because if you're an indie artist, right, you have creative control over all of it.
Yeah.
If you've got a record label paid producer, generally speaking, they've got the final say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it you know, it depends on how big you are and, you know, how much the record label trusts your artistic judgment. And, you know, because if you're the Beatles, you can release literally whatever you want and no one's going to say shit. And they did that, right? And they released weird as fuck shit and no one said anything because they were the Beatles, right?
And,
But
and so, although, if you recall, the Beatles had huge influences by the record label early on. Then once they
right,
became super famous, the record label was like, all right, you guys can do whatever the hell you want.
right, right.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you know, um,
As a brief, just I would call it covering my ass, but it's meant with more sincerity than that. I can already anticipate that there will be people who are like, Sam, you said that you said that this wasn't necessarily an empowering feminist message and offered no alternatives. You are just shutting women down. You don't want to do that. St. Vincent is awesome. Kimbra falls into some of the same traps sometimes, but is also super introspective in a lot of other places. I had a third. I will think of the third eventually. Oh, Bentley, who I think I might make us listen to next week. Bentley, female-led rock group, among other things. And I think really the central thing that I look to point to is just saying, like, rather than glorifying the suffering or the identity, like, you can still talk about it in a way that's like in situ, right? And isn't like relaying a story about it from the past, but like capturing some of the conflicted and tragic nature of it musically is something St. Vincent does really, really, really well, in such a way that, you know, she'll talk about these experiences in a way that's empathetic and relatable, but isn't saying like, this is how you should be. This is just the way you are. This is awesome. Get a shirt about this. Like, it frames it as this like fragile and ailing place rather than like lionizing one's own insecurities and pain. Sorry.
yeah, okay.
Had to do that. Had to offer alternatives. Not
Yeah.
alternative. Like, because this is still music worth listening to. Still good. But I did not want to offer a criticism without offering an instance of it being done well that I'm comparing it to. So.
Right. All right. All right. Let's see. I'm looking at my notes. There was a transition that was really good in it. I think it was between Mrs. Hyde and I Miss the Misery.
Yes.
I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's a really good transition. Let's see.
Which is, if you like, I've listened to the album on where it's not actually played in track order because of the deluxe track, and for whatever reason, the way it hit on my iPod at one point, it was playing in like alphabetical order or something like that. So then the two songs don't go next to each other, and you can hear where they're supposed to blend because they did a very good job blending it. That there's just a hint of overlap at the end of one track and at the beginning of the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Let's see, good hooks, catchy. Yeah, that's all my notes. That's it. Any outstanding notes for anyone else before we jump into ratings?
I think we hit pretty much everything that I had planned to talk about.
Awesome. Okay. Let's do it up. Ratings. Anyone want to go first? Anyone have strong opinions?
I figured I'd go last since I suggested the album, and I'm not going to be influenced just because I've heard the album a few times.
Sure.
I can kick off.
By all means.
Did we just lose? Okay. Is my internet crapping out, or is it just a spike?
Yeah, it just
Like
lagged
just
for a second, yeah.
Okay. Listenability here is super high. I would put it in the like, I think at this point pretty well established like 8 range, where it's like, yeah, this is I would be totally cool having this on in the background in most environments. I just wouldn't want it on repeat for several hours, right? Like, it's good. It at no point is like the sort of thing where I'm like, this is annoying, I want to turn this off, right? And again, there's like, the riffs are solid, the drumming is solid. Like, there's plenty to like bob along to and vibe to. So listenability is pretty high.
Silence.
Dead
air.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Cohesion. Cohesion's weird. I would actually, this would be one of the first albums that I'm going to put it pretty low on. It feels like we've been offered a sample platter more than one real artistic endeavor, right? Like, again, because we have these ballads, which feel pretty, frankly, disconnected from a lot of the more rock-heavy stuff. It feels like we see this, like, and admittedly, like, because I can never get myself to commit to a score, I'm also tempted to say, well, maybe that's intentional, right? Because she talks about this in Miss Hyde. She talks about this kind of like split personality, and this lyrically, the theme of voices in One Side continues to crop up over and over. So that's like resonant for her. So this kind of sense of like fractured identity that shows up in the album might be intentional. But usually when I see it done intentionally, there are still like some more immediately noticeable like unifying motifs, or like clever, like they'll take like a leitmotif and like change, or take a melody and like change it up in a bunch of different ways and recontextualize it, right? And that still gives you this kind of through line, even though it is dealing with all of this different fragmented stuff. So yeah, it feels like we have, in terms of discrete sections, we have the ballads, we have the stuff that's like, we have the rockers, we have the like anthemic rockers, and then we have the like stuff that they wanted teenage girls to like vibe out to in their room. And those are like the three the three sections, right? They're not super well unified. So yeah, it feels like more of a sample platter. So for Cohesion, I would give it like a 3 or a 4. The music's all good, it's all well produced, all of the instruments sit well together, but as an artistic offering, it just feels like a bunch of songs. Musicianship, yeah, I'll put that. I will also put that pretty high. It's really tightly delivered. It's always hard to tell when stuff is this well produced, whether it's a matter of like the musicians or if it's just the number of takes or a really good editing. But I'm going to err on the side of believing that they're very good. Brian has seen them live. Hopefully he can verify.
You'll never know, is the thing. Is in terms of production, you'll never know, and that's the point.
Yeah, but Brian has seen them live. Hopefully he can verify that they're good. I'm going to choose to believe that they are quite good. And give them, another solid 8. Decidedly above average. And again, like, yeah, she's a solid vocalist. Her influences from like early metal are pretty clear, but she does it well. She puts her own.
That's why I wore the Metallica shirt today, because you could feel the early metal, like classic rock influence on it. I was like,
yeah. So we've done Cohesion, we've done
Weird Factor.
Weird Factor. Yeah. Weird Factor is. I'm gonna pull a Tulsi Gabbard and just vote present on this because I don't really know.
Your bid for presidency is now over, Sam.
I just completely deflated Ethan.
I used to like Tulsi
until she did that. She lost all my respect.
I liked, literally liked Tulsi until she pulled that shit, and I'm like, you're just fucking appealing to Republicans. This is fucking bullshit. You just want to get a Fox News, fucking.
And she did.
Yeah. And she did.
Also, she was always a bitch in interviews that I saw. She was just so rude.
Whatever.
Yeah, but come on.
As a politician, part of appealing is to be able to tone it back a little bit. Unless you're a Republican, in which case you want to kick it up.
To quote Halestorm, you call me a bitch like it's a bad thing.
In her case, it was.
I don't want to discuss civility politics right now. I really don't. I'm so tired of discussing civility politics. I'm so fucking tired of it. Anyway, it's my turn. Listenability, I'll go with Sam. 8. It was great. It was very listenable. I think that's part of the point. It is not meant to be offensive to the listener. They want you to listen. I mean, one would say that is the point of all music, but I don't really think so. I think maybe that's the point of music that is like under capitalism, right? Is they want the most listenable, they want the most playlistable, like yeah, engageable without actually engaging, right? They want it to be the most natural of just you putting it on and it just happening. So very good. Especially the more simple riffs, the repetitive nature, but not being too repetitive. Like calling back to like themes and like the consistency within the individual tracks. Very listenable. Musicianship, I'm gonna put it one lower than Sam and put 7. I think that they are incredible musicians that didn't really get to show that off that much. I mean, they did, but I definitely think that there is a deeper depth that could be delved to even from these musicians, or from these musicians specifically, right? So I'm going to knock it down a little bit because I feel like it even like from them specifically, it could get better. Weird factor. Okay, so here's my take, and I don't know how steaming hot it is, but it is a at least warm take. For music that is all about being a freak and being weird, it is so fucking normal. And I think that it is kind of just a gimmick. Like, it's kind of like, okay, so I don't know if this is posted. Probably this is not posted. But when we discussed Avenged Sevenfold, it was sort of about the fetishization of the idea of being weird, right? Where like the idea of being weird was what they primarily relied on versus the actual like strangeness. And Avenged Sevenfold is certainly strange, but they are more, hey, look at how crazy weird we are, than they are actually like strange. And I think this music is even more so that, well, they're not as try hard, but still, like it is music for disenfranchised people who definitely have some kind of alienation or whatever that might cause them to feel like they're a freak, or whatever, right? Using the words from the but really, and I mean, this was released 8 years ago, so it's easy for me to say this now as it being old hat, but it just kind of seems like standard fare in terms of metal. Really, I can't give it weird factor points. I have to put it at like 4 because it's just not weird. I mean, female vocalist is a little different. It's definitely certainly different from a lot of metal. Metal is, a very male-dominated genre, but aside from that, Let's see. Album Cohesion. Yeah, it's fine. There was one really good transition. The rest of it was cohesive narratively, I guess. No, there's not really a narrative, but like it's it's easy to see how one person wrote all this music, or one group of people wrote all this music. It's not like some crazy difference between songs, but there is enough of a difference between songs that it doesn't necessarily feel like it was written as one piece. Just kind of sounds like it was written as different songs, which is totally fine. But it does, take some points on cohesion, so I'll probably go with Sam and give it a 4. And that's me. That's me, baby. It's Brian's turn.
All right. We'll start off with cohesion since that's where we were. I'm pretty much in agreement with you guys as to cohesion. I think, like Sam said, it does very much have that sampler platter sort of feel, but at the same time, I do think there's a reason the ballads all come one after the other on the album, because that does sort of interrupt the flow of the album. At the same time, the style of music is all very similar. It's obviously not remotely a prog piece or a concept album type of piece. So I'd give it a 5 on cohesion, just because it does. Having listened to their other albums, there is a bit of a different feel on this album that just stays consistent. So nothing spectacular as far as cohesiveness goes. Weird factor, it's not weird. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy the album. It takes from old school hard rock and 80s thrash metal and their influences and makes new music with it, which is not weird. The type of lyrics, I don't think, I agree with Ethan. I don't think these are weird lyrics, even if you look back 8 years ago. I don't think anything being done here is especially weird. So I'd say, between a 3 and a 4, we'll give it a 3.5. For musicianship, I have seen them live. They are very good musicians. I don't think this is a situation where the sound we're getting is because of overproduction or really doing 100 takes to get it. I think these are very talented musicians. There's a reason that they have won awards. They are very good at what they do. Like Ethan said, are they showing off the height of what they can do? I don't think so. I think there's sort of those parts where you can sense it. You get a little sampling of it, you get a taste of it, but they don't really fully do it. So I'd say musicianship, I'll give it an 8. And what the hell am I missing?
Listenability.
Listenability. For me, listenability is 8.5. It's very listenable. It's music that I can, great for working out. There's definitely tracks on the album that I really enjoy playing the drums along to. Love Bites, I Miss the Misery. Those are just there's good drums to it. It picks you up. So I think it's a very listenable album. Obviously, there are tracks that are more enjoyable than others on the album, but I think it's a very well done album overall. Especially that it does have that record label production aspect to it, where it's trying to go into the pop metal, but also at the same time it still has pure metal roots in it too, and you can feel that in some of the songs versus the other ones that just feel like there was a little bit more record label influence on them.
All right. That was all for you. Okay. Overalls. Brian, how about you go first? Because you ended it, so let's go back the other way.
Sure. So for me, I think overall I give this album an 8.5. It's a very good album. It's not a perfect album by any means. There's certainly things that can be improved upon. There's definitely those couple tracks that I'll go back and listen to while I'm playing the drums to play with, or I can exercise to the album, because it does have that upbeat aspect to it,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's also there's definitely room for improvement on the album as well, and it is. I generally prefer to see artists live, and this is no exception. Where the live work is definitely, I think, even better than what's on the album.
Nice. I guess I'm in the middle. I'm going to IGN it up once again and give it a 7. I think that's what I give every album that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it. So this is the most indecisive answer ever. But I just don't know, because part of me really likes it, but like in a shallow way. So I know that like I couldn't like listen to it a lot, but like another part of me is kind of annoyed by it, but also in kind of a shallow way where it's just like, oh, there's this one nitpicky thing here and there's this one nitpicky thing there. So I'm sorry. I need time to marinate. It's going to take me years before I know the answer. So, 7.
Fair enough.
I'm in a similarly indecisive place with it, right? Because it is this sort of thing where it's like, on the one hand, I can tell that this is being executed with like a genuine love for music and the work and like the vibe and space they're creating, right? Like, I don't want to cast aspersions on the artist in general, but I think I have the same feeling here that I've gotten in Vegas, where it's this like, yeah, there's like this spectacle and this satisfaction, and everything here is designed to be appealing, but what's the cost? Like, what is the cost in terms of like the worldview that is normalized? What is the cost in terms of the like artistic sacrifices that have had to be made here? And the effect that it had on the industry as a whole, right? Because again, this is post, like, there's a great, and I should say, I'm referencing this not because I think this is in any way close to being the worst offender, but I think I've mentioned the video before. Rick Beato on YouTube has a video where he's like, I helped ruin rock. Because he was one of the producers that was just the go-to guys for a lot of different people in the industry. And they had very rigorous demands, and they had this very like cookie cutter approach to like 3D printing rock icons and pop icons in like the mid 2000s, late aughts, and that would carry over into the 2010s. Again, I do not think this album is one of the worst offenders, but it is of that time.
Yeah.
And they were signed in particular during that time and brought into a contract during that time, and had to continue to deal with that. And he has a central device, he talks about this really brilliant band that he brought to the attention of record labels, who then chewed him up, spat him out, sanitized everything. They gave one guy who should not have had creative control over the project, creative control, and they took this really inspired band. And beside the point.
Yeah.
Not really sure that's in here, but that unease, that like Vegas type feeling of like admiring the spectacle but being kind of unsettled by what might be happening beneath the surface, makes it hard for me to pick a rating, because I agree that in an aesthetic and kind of surface level way, I really like it. But there are hints of things under the surface that I feel very strange about. So, yeah. If we're using IGN review standards, obviously it's a 7. If we're using 5 as dead average, I would give it a 5. I think we have skewed towards the IGN camp for the most part. I've tried to go.
That's totally up to you. What way you want to go. We, a collective though we are made up of individuals and have different scales of rating for each one of us. So if you want to give it a 5, that's fine. That's good.
What I will say, you know what? Fuck it. I'll say we're calling 5 dead average. I'm actually going to bump it up to a 6, if only because I think if you listen to this, it will give you a lot to think about. not necessarily based on what's being explicitly stated or contained within the music, but
well, you're assuming that the listener has the same kind of brain that you do.
no,
Some people, yeah.
But I'm saying, but if we're using it as my score, right, and we're assuming that I'm saying for me it was like it's an interesting case study.
Yeah.
Well, it is a strange case of.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the best closing statement we're ever gonna get.
Yeah, I can't beat that. We can end on that. I can't. I can't. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe. Tell us what you thought in the comments. And let us know something that you think that would be cool if we listen to. I would love to hear from people. We've gotten a couple comments on these videos, so who knows? Yeah, bye.